I'm sending data to YouTube. Well, it tells me Facebook is online. YouTube is live. This is good. Things are working. Don't actually see myself, but hopefully you can see audio. I'm going to turn some sound on so I can just hopefully hear myself momentarily. Can't hear a thing. That'll be why wrong speakers. Oh, hi there, Reese. Thanks for saying hello. Things are actually working. Just hearing myself back there. Sorry about that. Oh, that's good. Good stuff. It's working. I can see a comment from someone. The sound. Okay. So it's 25th of July, June, and it's 9:12 here in the UK in the evening, and it's a kind of balmy summer's day here. We're going into a heat wave across Europe in the next few days, and so it's quite warm here. And obviously I'm underneath these hot lamps as well, so which keeps me warm while I'm working. I've just done the usual round of updates to all the different gadgets and things. Everything seems to need an update, and I've also learned how to mute my microphone. So yesterday I was on here and I did a video on the airbrushing, and unfortunately when I was over at the airbrush booth I had all the sound bouncing between the two, so it probably sounded like an echo, but I know how to quickly mute things on the rig to get this mic turned off when I'm over at the booth, which is there, and there's another mic just there. So yeah, that's my aim, to try and get things running, and for once I have I think YouTube and Facebook working, so I've got all the magic crystals are aligned. I'm watching you whilst doing some paint. Oh, that's good. Yeah, any feedback or comments, welcome. Yeah, do enjoy doing some of your own stuff. And so this is what I did. Stepping back from procedure, maybe you can hear me if I'm a bit closer actually. I'm worried about that, going too far back. Anyway, so I did this yesterday, which was the next step of painting these MDF buildings, where I've added resin extra items for 15mm science fiction wargaming modular terrain layout I'm doing. I've added lots of resin items on here. If you've watched any of the videos before, you've sort of seen the progress on this. Yesterday I was doing masking. I was using this stuff, which is Jammy Dog masking tape, and they're still in business. I think they're in the UK, and they do masking tape in various pre-cut thin sizes. Obviously people in the, people buy this stuff, do things like the airbrush, model, remote control cars, all of that kind of thing. So there's a lot of demand for different materials for airbrush masking. And I used that on this bit at the top that you can see to mask a stripe around this sort of rooftop water container or oil container, to give it a bit of distinct look on the back of that. Right, also, on the bench, I also did the same on this one, which has got a smaller container on, and it's all nicely dry now. And as you can see, they're sort of all coming together. Both of the roofs on these are modular, so they can be popped in and out. And see, inside it's kind of empty building, but I need to maintain that empty space on there, because when I get around to putting the glass, which will just be plastic sheeting on the inside of those windows on there, I need to be able to access it to be able to do that. So at this stage, as I'm doing all the other painting, the windows are still empty, because I don't want to obviously put airbrush onto some neat new panels and cover them up. Otherwise I used the same red from the top there, and I used it on the walkway here to give it that kind of iron oxide look. All of it is work in progress, of course, so it needs weathering and super detailing. But when I'm going around with the airbrush, I'm picking out areas. So like I knew I had to do red on there for the stripe. In fact, I'll zoom in. Yeah, so I knew I had to do the red on the top for the striping that I was going to do on there and the detail work. And I used the same red to go over a brown I'd previously put onto this walkway to give it that, slightly rusty, painted ironwork kind of steelwork stuff look. And obviously when that's weathered, the detail will look quite interesting on there too. And there's a couple of palettes there that I got a blast from a brown at the same time. So yeah, the detail's coming along, and I think I mentioned yesterday, Nate, still 4:15 here in New York, almost quitting time. Yeah, I hope you haven't got too much longer in the day, and it's only a Tuesday as well, so we've got the rest of the week to go. But yeah, this rooftop, I added a N-scale model railway subway entrance, which obviously isn't exactly the right scale for 15mm, but I think that just looks just right on there and adds a bit of depth and interest to the top. Obviously, you're never going to use it, you're never going to stuff a model down there, but it just makes it look interesting. I'd like to sort of point that out. And then finally, the other item was this, which is the container, shipping container yard. Yard's probably about the best word I've got for it. And I've used the red on there, again, on two here. I've used this kind of Maersk blue that Graham Priestley, who often signs in, pointed out it's kind of almost like a Maersk lines colour here and here. And I've also left a brown one here, and there's a couple of grey and unsprayed ones. I think I'm going to do those white. So I've got a white one I'll do there, and a white one on the bottom of that. And that leaves possibly two that I'll just do in a kind of a neutral grey, beaten up grey. This one that's been airbrushed brown here, I'm going to do yellow, and that's the subject of tonight's episode. Because in the interest of trying to do something fresh in each one, I've had these for a couple of years, actually been sat in the garage, not doing much while I've been on other projects, but I've got these two different AK acrylic fluids that I bought, and one of them is heavy chipping. I have used them before, actually. Let me get something I've used them on. Live videos, just had to go and retrieve something. So basically they're in the world of 1/35th Wargaming, there are people that will use hairspray on their models. So they'll put a base colour on like a brown, hairspray it, let that dry, and then paint over the hairspray. And of course, you know hairspray is kind of water-soluble, sticky stuff, and it does dry out on the model. Then the layer that you paint or airbrush over the top of paint, you just hit it with some water and maybe a brush, and it will flake away the paint because underneath the hairspray is softening and revealing chips. And that's what I did on these two Clear Horizons drop pods. They look kind of weathered and interesting from a distance, but if you get up close you can see how that effect happened. And in fact what I used is this heavy chipping, I think I used on it. So I didn't use hairspray, but it's equivalent stuff. Hello Graham. So yeah, it's equivalent stuff I used on here, which is this AK. So as far as I know, what AK Interactive do is they buy thousands of cans of hairspray and then pour the contents out into here or spray it into here. No, they don't do that. They found a chemical equivalent to hairspray and they put it in there in liquid form so you can use it in your airbrush to spray on. So that's what I did here. And if I zoom in even more to this, you can see the sort of detail on there. Well, it's zoomed in okay without me having to refocus. So there you go. You can see it's quite a subtle effect. So I'll have to point it out because what I did on here is I didn't put a very strong colour underneath. So it was kind of like a pale brownish khaki sort of colour and then a white on top. Then when I used the water technique to rub off the top layer of paint, which was sitting on top of the chipping fluid, it revealed the sort of paint underneath, and you can see on top how that looks as well. So the paint from underneath is flaked off. So it wasn't too much of a rusty effect, but then I added other colours like rust colours on there, even though this isn't necessarily rusting. It's some other kind of, you know, these are drop pods, aren't they? So some sort of acid in the atmosphere as they dropped on a couple of missions that have been used on before has slowly peeled away at the whatever coating, plus the super temperatures that they face as they come down through the atmosphere, of course. So yeah, those both. This one, well, that's quite a good sight to see again, where the heavy chipping, which I did with this chipping material, has allowed me to rub off the paint on the outside. Of course, finally they need a dull coat, because if you don't put a dull coat on here, they're potentially open to hot, sweaty hands rubbing off a layer of paint as this kind of hairspray type stuff underneath takes on your moisture and creates more chipping and damage, which you don't want once you've sealed it and you've finished the project. Yeah, so otherwise these are on metal discs. I've mounted them on and put some bits of terrain on there. So Harold, who made these models, obviously they're 3D designed. They are just sort of a couple of comments on them. Incredible detail, because even though they're 15mm scale gaming, wargaming models, to me they're near up to that sort of grade that you get in a model kit, because this slide out section here for this sort of stabilizer or whatever it is, maybe something like a parachute deploys out of there, whatever. When you're modelling it together, you actually glue in all of these hydraulics. The same with these are separate hydraulics that door and attach to the door. And you can also do the door in a closed position with the same kit. You just pop off, you don't put these two hydraulics on, and that same door down there will fit flush into that area. Yeah, Reese, I kind of sometimes, I think, if a warring nation or a response team that's been dropped in somewhere rapidly is successful, they'll be trying to maintain resources, and they will potentially pick them up. Obviously there's going to be some lost in war or destroyed because they're no longer serviceable, but I would have thought they would, if they were successful in a mission, they might have some kind of extraction technique where a larger dropship comes down and they're just whipped back up onto the back of a lorry and then taken off planet or back to base or wherever it happens to be. The other thing, Reese, interesting enough on this kind of subject, I recently read a brilliant book, and I intend to do it's like a comic book. I intend to do a video on it, but I won't mention any more detail. But in this comic, they basically land on far-reaching planets, and they reuse the kind of drop pods and orbit to Earth vehicles as their first settlements. So fantastic artwork in this book, which I will mention when I have to do it on another day, because it's completely somewhere else in the house and I can't remember the name of it. But I would love to do that sort of terrain where you use bits of rockets and bits of pods like this and built it into a building. So you kind of glance at it and you go, hang on a minute, there's a bit of a thruster in there somewhere, but they're reusing that to gather water on the roof or something. So it gave me some nice terrain ideas, and this sort of also sort of stimulates that sort of thinking as well. So yeah, those are my two drop pods. I've used them a few times in games. Harold has written some rules for grunts that support the drop pods, and they're just a bit of fun really to sort of drop in behind enemy lines. I mean, these particular ones, there's no weaponry on them, so they would just deploy either. I think we had it so that you had a certain amount of capacity in there to drop on a small light scout mecha or something, or a single or two squads that have been housed in there when they drop. Right, there was me. I was meant to be doing airbrushing, wasn't I? And I've just gone off on various tangents. Oh, and for the prosperity, let's detail Harold's. I put it on a magnet, but this is the non-deployed pod. As far as I was concerned, I'd still use it as a drop pod, though. You'd say, okay, they've dropped there, and you'd put it down if you needed to use it. But this is the one with all of the doors closed. So basically, all I did on this was keep the doors up and didn't do it in a deployed mode. So I ended up with 3 of these, and 2 of them in deployed, and one of them still looking a bit tatty like this. One thing I have seen, someone did this really professionally. I didn't. I did it in my usual way, which is I don't care about painting underneath, because when it's on a table, it's just in the game, and I'm not worried about what it looks underneath. But I've seen someone do this sort of coming down through the atmosphere, and obviously they put sort of flames and burn marks around, and that's maybe with the weathering. In hindsight on this, I could have done some weathering that were blackened streaks going up from the base. So do some streak weathering with a brush, an oil paint or something, and streak up from here, looking like burn marks that have carried up around the side. I didn't do that, but I thought I'd just show that off in its non-deployed position, ready to go. Yeah, great detailing again on there on the top, these little thrusters that would be obviously engaged before they drop into the atmosphere to adjust their trajectory. And even does have this, which is potentially a thruster on the bottom. I just put a magnet in there because I thought I might put it on a base, but ended up not doing that. Still, it's got a magnet there for show. Right, popping that away, and now going to the actual job in hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use yellow on here, but before I do that, I'm going to spray on the heavy chipping fluid. I'm then going to probably dry that in a hairdryer. When I say hairdryer, I mean I do have a hairdryer here, this one, a little handy hairdryer to speed up drying, so that's completely dried, and then I'll spray the yellow on, and then hopefully that's within half an hour. I'll be brushing off the chipping and showing some, rusty looking stuff on there. And because last night I put the brown on here already, I don't have to worry about the fact that I need to do the paint on there, because that's the brown that's going to show through the yellow, giving it that slightly rusty look. Obviously, the other thing with doing this is that it is a gradual staged approach. Once I've punched that with the heavy chipping fluid through the airbrush, then I've put a yellow on, then I've brushed them off. I've still got more to do. There's still more weathering, so I might do a wash on there or something similar. Yeah, and there's no harm also that these ones will get some washes of weathering done on them, possibly some chipping, but I won't use that technique on them. I just thought I'd make one particularly beaten up, rusty looking yellow one that will stand out as a kind of older container in the yard sort of thing, rather than them all looking really new. I seem to have a family of dogs and things outside barking away. And here we have another container on the side of this one, which I've put the Ground Zero Games doors on. And also on this side there's a GZG door there, but because I've sort of put it on the side of that one with a vent, that container sort of looks like it's part of the sort of building work, that someone's used that to extend the lab or something there. And I just kicked some airbrush into the back of the side there as well. So I might put some yellow on there, even though it's the reddish one, and chip it up as well, just to sort of keep it interesting. I won't put a great deal of the yellow on top of the airbrush stuff, the chipping material. So that's the task at hand, and I better get over to the airbrush and make that happen. Oh yeah, evacuation pod. They could have a big thruster on the bottom to get into orbit, couldn't they, Graham? I think that's possibly a valid use of them as well. So one thing I will do just before I go over, I'll go over to my Raspberry Pi, which I've got sitting here. I think my mouse has come free. No, I haven't got my Raspberry Pi on. I was going to show the chipping material. I think I've got a slight malfunction there, using the wrong mouse perhaps. Anyway, I'll switch over to the airbrush and then I'll just get on with it, otherwise I'll be here forever. So now I'm going to use the mic. It's going to go very silent because I'm going to mute this mic so I don't have two mics on at the same time. Here I am on the other mic. Hopefully I'm looking back to see that I've got some activity. Yes, I can see vocals. Okay, so yeah, I'm talking on this one. So there's the heavy chipping material. This is nice to prepare for the airbrush because all you do is pour it in. And there's my airbrush. I do need to put the noisy extractor on behind here. And then I'm just going to pour some of that in. It's kind of gloopy looking, which I guess is that's kind of that hairspray sticky kind of style that it is. I'm also going to pick a yellow. Basically they're the same. basically got 3 yellows that are all the same. Yeah, they're all, oh no, this is gold yellow. And then I have standard yellow. That's seen better days, perhaps. And this one feels okay, so I'm going to just start mixing that up. And then I've got this pipette. These are kind of vital for transferring materials. So once I've got this out, I will give this a shake. It probably doesn't really need a shake. And yeah, it's got a bit bubbly in there now. I don't think I'm going to need an awful lot because I've only got a couple of small surfaces I'm doing. A bit more than that, I think. I think that's going to be enough. It doesn't need much. It's probably really nasty stuff to put through your airbrush, but it's going to be acrylic, so it can't be that bad. But you can imagine it's very sticky stuff compared to paint. So just put my airbrush aside in its holster. And see if I can find my materials. Yeah, so I was showing masking last night when I was doing this. Or I was just using an old piece of card. It just helps you keep it off areas you don't want the materials to, the paint to go on. I mean, that's coming out. You're not going to see it because it's a clear spray. Actually, it's even quite hard to see on the actual canister. It's not the end of the world if you get overspill with this, because you just basically, eventually you're going to be dull coating over this. That's enough. I mean, that's blasted on there. So maybe if I do, I'm gonna blast some on this one as well, on the basis that I'm gonna do this. I'll do 2 different styles. I'll do a yellow over a black base, and I'll do yellow over the brown, and then see what the 2 different chipping results are. I'm sure they're both going to look fine as an end result, so I'll just hit it. Strange stuff, it just appears to almost instantly dry. Hairspray, isn't it, basically? That's what hairspray does, it instantly dries on your hair. That's probably enough. Yes, that's probably enough. And then I've got this other building where I will be a little bit more careful here. Why not? Why not? Because I've done that white, and these have got a grey base, so why not hit and make this whole thing look a bit chipped up? I mean, even the door. I mean, this must be the least exciting airbrushing ever, because all you're seeing from this is nothing. Because it's a clear chipping fluid that's going on here. So basically I'm priming all of this area ready for some heavy chipping when whatever colour I decide to finally put on top of this area is finished, it'll chip back to the grey underneath. So I'm even going to do it on the doors on there too. I'm not going to put a load on those doors because you don't need it everywhere. You know, you could put it around the areas of heavy use. And of course you're not going to pull it all off either. It's not all going to be brushed off. You'll just be brushing off areas that you like the idea of brushing off. So I've nearly used all of that. I will clean out the brush. Yeah, hopefully the audio is better than it has been before. I can't see your comments, by the way, over here. That's the next piece of technology step to do, is to enable me to see some comments on a video over here, a stream. So it's very difficult to see how I've cleaned this out because it is just clear hairspray stuff, isn't it? I will spray a bit of water through. So that's a bit better. Right, so I'm going to move over to the desk. I'm going to turn this mic off, and then I'm going to just use the hairdryer to really dry that off before I do the next coat. Right, so I should be back now. Yeah, so here I am. And as I was saying, I've done the brown one there. I've hit with the chipping material, and I also did it on this one on the end over here. So you can see actually it's looking a bit sticky in areas where it's gone on, and even on there's a bit of pooling of the stickiness, but I did manage to spray the whole lot. And then this building, that heavy chipping fluid is on just about everything on this section and on the two doors on the side, and you can see it's given that kind of gloss look. So if I get out the old hairdryer now, I shall start to dry off the chipping material. So this is the other one, Worn Effects, and it just doesn't strip as much when you use the water on it to take away the layer of paint that's over the top of it. It's more stubborn, so you end up with finer chips, which is okay, but I'm obviously looking for big chunky chips on the side of these containers, so for effect, visual effect from a wargame table rather than a military or rusting accuracy, I want it to look bold. I think that one's dry. And this is all resin, this is really heavy in the hand, but this one's obviously not dry. I can still see a bit of shine off it. Chunky chips is the way forward, yeah. It is drying there. Apologies for the hair dryers. Oh, you can put a little chunky chip. You put a chips logo. How did you get chips on there? Reese, I've no idea how you managed that. That was amazing. I've got some French fries. Anyway, so as you can see, that's still looking a bit sort of sticky, but I think it's dry. It's just what I was doing when I first started spraying there. It was drying the instant it was hitting the model, and I just went on a bit too heavy there. So I think rather than it being wet still, it's just actually a sheen of the chipping material on there. So that's going to chip a lot there if I do any, of the waterwork on top of that. So now I'll go over the top with the yellow paint, the yellow airbrush paint, and then we'll do the chipping grand reveal once I've dried that with the old hairbrush as well. So back to the other mic again, muting this one now. Here I am back over the other side, and I haven't switched the camera. Rolls back over now that the camera's in place. Wax the mic. Right, so where's my yellow? Is it that one I was using? Oh, that one's got plenty in it. So good shake again. I mean, I know it's really boring material, but I'm live, so you have to see the shaking bit. And yeah, it's just Vallejo gold yellow I'm using. Or was I going to use the other one? Yeah, I was going to use the straight yellow rather than the gold yellow. Well, that's shaken up enough, I think. Start to load it. So obviously handy thing here, of course, straight away, Vallejo airbrush paints. They're very thin already. You can't really paint with them with normal brushes very easily. Oh, and I forgot my first step, which just to keep things flowing through the airbrush, I tend to put a few drops of this airbrush flow improver in first. It just means that when I mix it around in there, I think that's going to be enough for the job. A bit more for good measure. So always the thing with airbrushing is that what I tended to do when I first started, I used to really heavily load up the airbrush. I have no idea why. I don't know what I was doing, but I put far too much in, half a pot of paint, and it's just not needed. So I will, well, I'm not doing my normal. I nearly did it, but I'm not going to put the varnish in, because obviously if I add that varnish now to this paint and spray it on top of the chipping, the varnish is going to do its best to seal everything together, and it will make it harder to do it should still work, the chipping, because you'll be able to use moisture that will go through that mecha varnish while it's drying, but I'd rather just put the paint on neat. So I've got the yellow on there, and that's dripping nicely in there, just mixed with the flow enhancer, which just means it keeps everything moving nicely and thins it down somewhat. I mean, that's the thing with all airbrushing, is that it's going on so light that if you thin it down a bit, you just come back after it's dried and do another coat. So there's that's going on okay. Onto my test sheet, I shall now get the model. I've put my mask on now just to keep some of this out of my face, so I may sound a bit muffled. And again, you can go to town on these things by, I could put some masking tape on here, I could put card down and mask it off, but because I'm in a rush and I'm just doing it quickly, I just use a bit of card that's getting a bit messy. I could do with a stack of these really, and I'll just spray it straight on. In fact, I can start on the card, just check that the flow's okay. So I'm going on there, and then just move over onto the shipping container. And that's enough for a first blast, doesn't need to be much. I see the overspill down there. I'll have to tidy that up later. will put the card down on the base there. That'll stop some overspill there. Oops, unless it sprays away. So that's gone on okay, and now you'll notice on the black here it's going to go on a lot. It's not going to look as strong a yellow. It's probably going to need a couple of coats on the darker colour underneath. See, it's going on a bit less evenly because of such a dark tone underneath. But there's no harm in having some sort of graduation anyway, and that's what's happened over there. There's some of the darker brown and then a lighter yellow, and that's fine. Bit less caring there, just splatting it on there now. This side's going to be a bit harder to get to. So that'll do. And I will do the other one. I'll probably need my rather sticky card now. Start to leave traces of itself on other things. That's going to do. Oh, and I'm not going to spray the doors, or am I? Yeah, I might try some of the yellow on the doors. So I just hit those there as a base colour, which can be detailed up as well later. But also would be nice to do some of that chipping on there. So you can see how much paint I've got left. I've got to wash that out because I haven't really got anything else to do. I mean, I'm always saying this in every video, but you know, you've got to have an air pump like this to get rid of your paint. And then you can just splash a bit more in there until it runs clear. So yeah, that's just running clear now. So that's the airbrush extractor fan going off. There's big hum, and that'll do for sort of cleaning the airbrush. I can see on the end, on the inside the crown, I need to clean out some muck there, but I'm not going to do that now. I'll do that before I next use it. A bit like a barbecue. Alright, switching off this one and heading back over to do the sort of grand reveal bit. So I'm a bit warm after that. I had the old mask on for a while, and oh, thanks for the chips, Graham. So you've managed to get those on there too, great. Yeah, so in front of me, it's now coming along, and ooh, I can smell the paint. I can see it's drying already on the top of there, on one of these ones here, this one, and you can also, even from a distance there, hopefully you can see that I did leave some brown on near the edge, so it's got a kind of gradient through there slightly rather than hitting it totally. I have hit the, if I zoom in on it, I have kind of accidentally hit some of the ground, and that will be cleaned up. When I did this other big piece, I did do a final clean up, sort of a little airbrush around the edge that both darkens the building and also just tidies up any overspill on the side there. You can see it's still got overspill there, but that doesn't. It just looks like some rust has sort of rained down from the funnel. But yeah, that's the idea. Is that once it's done, I clean up afterwards, so you will get, so you can see overspray from various containers. So whilst that's drying, while we're talking, I'll show the other one off. I will show this one on the edge, so you can see yellow doesn't go over that very dark grey-black very well. It's looking a bit shiny as it's drying there, this one. But you can really see the difference between that one being over brown, and it just looks a little bit more successful. I could hit that again with another coat of the yellow, and that would really strengthen that colour, but you know, I'm not going to bother. And on this one you can see it just doesn't look as good over a dark grey, but it will, once that chipping is done on there, it should look interesting. So it's just 2 more containers. You know, I'm taking my time over this project. It's interesting to do. Obviously I'm sharing the information rather than rushing through as well, so it's quite good fun. Eventually this will be finished. It just takes a few weeks to sort of organise myself around it. And then this one, you can see I was much lighter, so there's not going to be much chipping coming off this one, because I was much lighter on the red that I put on there already. And obviously I haven't sprayed the door yet, so even though I'm going to try some chipping on here, I'll see how I get on with the chipping on the containers on the other base before I get onto this one tonight, because I might do the door before I do the chipping, because the door has got the hairspray on it as well, so there'll be no harm in spraying the door in whatever colour it's going to be, and then I can chip the whole thing at the same time. And then on the other side you can see I just punched some into there. There's not much, but it's given it a kind of yellow dusting, so that'll be interesting to see how that chips off as well. It flakes. And those doors there, you can see again, as I said on the other one, the yellow doesn't go on that great to the darker colours, but as a base on there, I can chip that, and then I'll start to detail these up later on. I may paint the edges of those larger doors. But I've got more work to do on all of them, really. I just thought I'd hit that at the same time, because I had hit them with the chipping material. So it's time for the... well, first of all, tidy things up a bit here, but then it's going to be drying time with the whole hairdryer to speed up this process. And again, if you're a viewer that's watching this back in the future, just speed through these bits. It's just because I'm doing these live, it's best to try and speed up the process. I heard someone say once that using a hairdryer can make paints a bit fragile because you're speeding up the drying. I must admit, I've never seen paints go fragile after doing the speeding them up with a hairdryer. I don't do it all the time, obviously only when I'm doing the filming to try and get this done quick. In fact, I'll not move on to the other one. I'll let that dry more naturally over there and make some room for this. So, next step, I need to get some water and start to use it on here to flake off some of this paint. And you do have to be quite sort of vigorous with it. So let's see how I get on. I'm going to go and get some water. I'll be back in just a second. I think someone said use warm water. I can't remember what I did last time I used it, if I used warm water or not, but I have some water here to hand, so I'm just going to pour some in there. I guess this is room temperature water because it's been sat around there. Now, I could use just like a stubborn little brush, I think, if I've got something like that. I have, actually. I've got a Citadel one, believe it or not. I'll zoom into that so you can see the kind of brush it is. I mean, it seems to be ideal for this kind of work to me, but it's a little stubby one. I don't know if it is as a dry brusher. It's called a stippling brush from Citadel, and because it's kind of rough, I thought that might, and stiff, that might work with a bit of water on to help shift off some of the paint. So, well, wish me luck. What one should I do it on first? I might do it on this one that I'm not so bothered about, on the back end. Before I move on to the... So also I've got an old toothbrush in there, and yeah, because I've seen people use that to do it, but I haven't used a toothbrush before. I've had that toothbrush in there because I do clean resin bits and things in there with some soapy water occasionally. So I've got some water on here. I'm putting it on. Apparently you do need to sort of wait for the water to sort of penetrate both the paint and the hairspray type stuff with the chipping effects underneath. So there you go, straight away. So that's a bit, I reckon that's a bit stiff. Let's move in closer to forensically check on progress down here. So there you go. So this one obviously has the dark brown underneath, so the chipping's going to look different than the one which doesn't have that on it, which has the brown and is a little bit more even. So now I'm concerned I've gone on with maybe too stiff a brush. So certain bits I'm hitting a bit harder with the brush and pushing, and I've gone away from that really thick Citadel brush there because it was really dragging the paint off. See, it is starting to pull away and reveal the underside, and that's probably the closest you're going to see. And what I think I should do is rough and stiff suit you. So yeah, yeah, I'm trying not to be too rough and stiff with this, but obviously what you want to do is go on the edges. I do now think I do need to get with that stiff brush again to get it shifting. Try and keep it in focus while I'm on there. There we go. So how about this along the edge then? Let's try that. It's great on the edges. And obviously this is kind of experimentation using the darker colours, but it is looking like it's chipping there. And I think I mentioned before, I do want to try and make this look kind of bold. I don't want it to look completely like people are looking too subtle. I've got some fluff in there. Gunk as well. Obviously that's the other challenge here, is because what you're dealing with is hairspray, or the equivalent of in this heavy chipping material, and it just sort of tends to obviously get wet and then want to dry quite quickly again afterwards. Wow, that's close. I'm able to see this better by looking at the camera than I am looking at the model itself, due to aging eyesight. So we will be able to see, quite interesting here, the difference between doing this on the grey, which still looks like it's like a metalwork underneath that's being revealed by a sort of poor quality, battered up paint job. And this is something interesting which I did see before, is that you do kind of get flaking, and I don't know really how to combat that, other than it's going to look like the paint's flaking as well. The paint job is flaking on there. I think you could definitely be, maybe use a different brush that has less of a tendency to make it flake. See, maybe now if I use a less stiff brush, I can clean off maybe without being quite as rough. Again, I think I mentioned before, I do want this to look like it's well battered, so that from the tabletop, because I'm not doing this for like showcase hobby, I'm doing this so that you'd look down at this from a great height rather than just on the table. Rather than close up for model scrutiny. I'm just doing this for, oh look, that looks really nicely weathered, when you're sort of playing a war game from about 3 meters distance. So let's flip the view a little bit, zoom out, push it over a tad, and get back that stiff brush and start working on the front there. So I think I said before as well that it's not a case of finishing once you've done this, because you can still add weathering powders, grease effects, and any number of other interesting things to weather up your containers or whatever it is that you happen to be doing this chipping on, because they'll take an extra treatment really well. Because if you do like a rusty wash, try and spit that out after a day of work, you can improve it even further, because this has had no washing into any of the sort of nooks and crannies on there. I'm not trying to be. I'm just being rough and ready with this. But you could, if you had the time, go to town and make it look like certain damage from, this has been dropped in this direction and the damage is scratched up the side. So you could do a really big, damaging scratch that carries all the way over there. You can see that peeling going on there. That's the only thing I'd say, is that with all of this technique is that, and I noticed it when I did those drop ships, which I showed at the beginning of the video, I'm kind of really feeling like I need to go back on sometimes and clean up some of the gunk. Although that does just then look like natural flakage, and once you put your other weathering details on, like I mentioned, with any rust or dust effects or anything I'm going to add, it's going to disguise any of these little bits of flakes and things, really. So yeah, I mean, I've started on that one. I've not finished it, and the reason I'm not rushing it is because I don't want to just wreck it in an instant. But you could rush this if you were doing a load of these. Look, I will be a bit quicker now along the edge here, just to sort of scrape off, and it's particularly along this top edge as well, considering that's where they're most likely, the tops and bottoms, where they're going to get kicked and scratched. Also, there's something satisfying about revealing a darker underside to something. And obviously these front sections could be painted up better as well. I could put sort of stainless steel in the in those sort of locking joints and things on there. And there you go, some stiff rubbing I was doing there in the middle, to make it look like, that's where the doors batter together. And then go back on with the softer brush, I think, with some water, just to sort of help clean off some of the flaking. It's not going to get everything, but it does sort of seem to help improve it a little bit. Yeah, so that's the effect on. It's looking pretty knackered, isn't it? And let's back off this then. Just as a quick glance, obviously I haven't done a great deal on the roof section. I've done a big bit on the side that looks like a major dent and scratch. That probably needs a bit of tidying up with a wet brush there. And then on the front, it's stripped it off. That's not in focus. Now you could paint this sort of thing, but I don't think, that's the benefit of an airbrush, is that, I may have taken quite a long time to do that tonight, and I only did the two. But it's a quick way of doing some interesting damage on there. I reckon that will weather nicely with a wash on top of there too, which I'm not going to do tonight, but yeah, I've cleaned a lot of the gunk off there now. So if we zoom back in onto that door just to see the treatment, I mean, it's drying. Why don't I punch that with a hairdryer while I'm at it? Yeah, apologies for the loud hairdryer. So there you go. I mean, particular details that look great are when you sort of streaked across here. Very similar to a streak across a cricket pitch. And you can see that's flaked off very nicely there and looks quite natural. I've got a few chunks of painty bits here and there that need tidying up. Obviously I haven't dried the side there, and it's got some good flaking going on. And the roof bit, which I didn't really go quite so much to town on. I think that will take some weathering wash on there, and that will really look quite filthy. So the one that's been done properly, where I sprayed a proper brown to give it a kind of rust feel underneath, over this side. Let's work out how this works. If I can get my brush the right way around and things going on here, get this in focus. So this is the interesting bit that's being slightly gradiated as well. So but let's go for it and see it reveal some of the brown underneath. I am again using the stiffer style brush. I remember distinctly this patch here got a really big blast of the chipping material. In fact, it is a bit of a challenge to see it, isn't it, when it's wet. So we'll dry this one in a moment. So yeah, on that same basis as I did on the other one, I sort of went on with a stiff brush that has really peeled it back, and now I'm using a slightly lighter brush to continue the process of sort of wetting it and digging out some of the goop that's coming off it. That's been put on by the heavy chipping fluid. Yes, if you've come into this late, I'm using the Worn Effects from AK Interactive. Well, actually the other one, which is the heavy chipping, which is over the other side of the room, but that's what I'm sticking on there. I don't know which hairspray to use, and I bought this stuff 4 or 5 years ago and not really used it much apart from on that. I'd have used it a few times, but I used it on those drop ships, and then it's stuck in the garage. So really, once you've had something for 4 or 5 years, my daughter stopped using hairspray about 3 or 4 years ago when she went off having the sort of stuck-up hair, and no one else has hairspray in the house I can grab. If you do search on YouTube though and do hairspray technique, modelling hairspray technique, you will get a lot of good examples from the sort of military modelling world, where they know the brands, you know, Tresemme, or maybe it's Maybelline, maybe she's born with it. Whatever the brand you happen to pick, there's probably some recommendations on YouTube for particular hairsprays that the modelers like to use. Oh, not on screen. Not on screen. Yeah, that's a reasonable view across the. Yeah, I'm always taking all the paint off the side there. It's quite pleasing. Let's see what that starts to look like. Yes, I think I mentioned before it's a technique where you're sort of building up in the sense that I am doing damage on here with this, but I will need to do some further weathering to sort of bring the whole thing together with some sort of rust effects and things on there. In fact, because this is all acrylic, I could use one of the AK Interactive. I think they do have an enamel rust, but I don't have that to hand. Tesco own brand yeah, that could probably fine. You don't need to use Maybelline or whatever the other top brands are in the hairbrushing hairspray world. Yeah, so it's particularly interesting to me around where there's some variation where the paint was already going into the darker colour, and otherwise it's looking quite sort of devastated. Compare that to having the darker undercoat. It looks quite different really, and does look like a different, a totally different container colour really. Again, I'm sort of zooming in on the bits that might pick up more damage around the edge of the doors and the centre, the handles. And you can be quite tough on it really. You just have to be prepared for the fact that, you know, you are obviously trying to damage the model in terms of the effect, the overall effect. And probably the more rough and careless you are, the better the result will be. It's funny, isn't it? This side is not shifting as easy at all. It must be because I didn't put as heavier... it's coming out now, but I didn't maybe put as much of the chipping material on this side. It didn't get quite the same blast of it. Now I'm just going to go on with the lighter braked off and pooling around the base as well. You get little gunky bits off. The lighter brush that I'm doing here to just sort of pull off some of the gunk, just going straight down off the edge is the best option because it just sort of pulls it off towards the bottom of the material of the base. You could even spray over again and chip over it, really weather it. I'm happier with the result on the flaking off that one. That one looks really nicely weathered with the brown underneath. Try and get it in focus. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. As a first pass, obviously, I need to detail it up. And this one, I'm comfortable with that, looking like a really knackered container. I haven't done that side of it yet. I did do the door, and you can see the difference in the two doors there now between the one that had the brown and then the yellow, and the one that was just yellow on top of the sort of grey primer like that. Both have their sort of own place in terms of quality. So I might hit this with a dryer. And for those that don't often play in the sort of 1 true scale 15mm, I mean, if I put a model up there, you can get a view for what size of model we're looking at. And then obviously we're in close here, so you know, close scrutiny always tends to distract from these things, but let's just say I was going to do some weathering on there just for a laugh while I'm up. I have this Tensnacombe Life Colour burnt brown, which is okay. And then I've got a burnt umber, that's a good colour. I could oil, these could take an oil pin wash as well, really. Probably would be the easiest. I have a couple of other colours over here. But the burnt umber, let's just put a little bit on there and just see how it details up the when there's a bit of a pin wash type thing going on with this burnt umber before I finished. So yeah, this is Life Colour. This range of washes that they do comes with a remover. The closest thing, I guess, to these is probably things like the new Games Workshop contrast paints are probably a bit like this stuff, and you can. But with the contrast paints, obviously, you can't remove them. With these, you can, because you can use that remover, and even though they're acrylic, it will sort of strip some of it off. So. Oops, almost tipped the paint over. Quite difficult to get in on a good angle on this. But yeah, massive brush, so I should be taking a lot more care with that with a narrow brush, but I haven't. That's not a good plan. Let's get rid of that big brush. I'm going to use a thin brush with a small amount of paint, and then I'm going to sort of pin wash down the side, just into these bits. Didn't do that very well either, doing this from the side angle. And then I think if you went onto this with some silver, probably should have done it before, put the sort of pin wash bit on. On the on some of the scratched areas. I'm literally painting this from the side so that I could keep it on camera. So I have no idea what it's going to look like when I get it back in my face. I'm no longer in focus either, so neither I can't see it and neither can the paying audiences. So there you go. And then if I was to use some of this Life Colour remover, obviously I don't even need to do that because it's looking quite knackered up there already, but it doesn't really matter because it's such a small part of this overall model. But you can put a little bit of remover on and it helps you sort of shift some of this paint you've put on away from certain areas, and obviously it's thinning it, diluting it at the same time. And yeah, it's just adding, I think, some dust effects on here. And that could look fantastic. Or even more rust colours if you were really bothered. But it is just such a small part of a larger base that you're paying for your internet subscription, you're paying for your computer access or mobile phone, Everybody's paying. You're not paying me. I get nothing apart from just the huge fan base of 30 or so people that might watch it. So there you go, slightly rustier look. So the cheapest hairspray has the less sort of super gunk that they put in to keep you with a bouffant hairstyle perfect all day long. You buy the cheap stuff that would just, that hair flick will just flop after half an hour, but it's more relevant for using for the chipping technique. So yeah, that was just a very quick blast of some burnt umber on there, just into corners, and basically it just adds to the effect, doesn't it? And I would normally do that much quicker. I'd be doing a lot more at once. I might be doing its effect on there at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I'm relatively happy with the sort of weathering on there using that. It's certainly flaked off a lot of paint. I do think that the technique results in some gummy paint that is very difficult to remove, and I've seen this when I've watched it in videos as well. But once you've weathered it up, I mean, it's looking good. I'll use the slightly more subtle burnt brown actually. Oh, thanks, Reese. That's appreciated. Oh, you have added to my my hobby funds then by supporting the rules, which is really appreciated. I mean, I always say to people, because some people, early on when I published the rules, I mean, it was in the early days of, self-publishing. 2012, I mean, people had self-published before, but it's a much more subtle brown going in there as a sort of a wash that just looks like dirt. So what was I going to say? So as I say, when I first published my rules, some people, because I'd had a website and published the rules and went to game shows and things, I think they thought that I was a big business, and obviously you're not. It's more of a sort of a hobby industry. In fact, a lot of people moan, don't they, at Ground Zero Games' website, because John doesn't sort of tend to put a lot of colour images of the models on show. He just sort of goes for an easy, quick fire photo of the metal model, and people say, oh, you could sell so much more if you did a proper website and you had a full running business. But I think he has a cottage industry business, and I think the danger is with that is that when you go from cottage to the next sort of grade up, medium-sized business, you have to hire more staff. Your costs go right through the roof. As you see with these big Kickstarters that people do, they see a lot of money coming in. Oh, I've done a Kickstarter, it's made us $250,000. We're really a successful business. First year, $250,000. But of course, then they realise that every day that they're not pushing out produce while the Kickstarter's on hold, they're not making any money. And that is a challenge for these businesses that sort of shoot up quickly. How do they maintain a consistent sort of sales pattern? And that's what John at Ground Zero Games has done, because for, I don't know, it must be 30 years possibly now, he's still in business, still going to the shows, still a successful trader, without becoming that sort of boom and bust next big thing. Yeah, I mean, that needs a lot of work. I think the whole thing's going to look great when it's done, he says, halfway through the project. And I'm pleased that I've got a little bit more done tonight, and it's just all part of the process, really. Once I've got through, you can see again on a finished item how much extra detailing will go on with the doors being in different colours. And extra details around these doors too. There's a lot more work to do. And then just going back to the other one where I put that on, I now just have to remember for future that I have put that hairbrush sort of chipping material underneath there. I may yeah. back out to me again. So there it is. I mean, I think straight away from a distance, you know, when you're on the table playing with this and you've got some, you know, troops and things on there and it's in action and the whole thing's looking a little bit more weathered and interesting, it's this one that wins. That I did a proper brown underneath before I did the yellowing, but I think it still works on here. On the other one, which you can't now see because I'm too far away, but the weathering's going to look okay on there too. When I do a dark wash, some oil staining, and maybe pick up some silvers around the metal edges that have been knackered by use over the years. So yeah, just zoom in one more time with the sort of models on there so you can sort of see the scale again of things when they're moving around. And I think I mentioned before, because I'm building these for gaming, I'm not building it as a, you know, just as a piece of to allow for, you know, troops to move ladders or anything up here, but it's assumed that, you know, there were things on there to make it look like someone had sort of prepared it to go climbing up. So that's the view, and that's just another one little minor step in that direction tonight to get it finished. And so, oh yeah, All Quiet on the Martian front was interesting. They did so much. I have a spider sense for Kickstarters that are not doing so well, and what it is they companies overreach, and they overreach by doing far too much on the materials and stretch goals. So they end up, you know, potentially producing 2 full armies with every model you could ever want in a Kickstarter, and really they should have started small. You know, start with, you know, half a dozen vehicles for each faction and a few squads, and not go that full crazy way where they just seem to produce tons and tons of materials for the Kickstarter. And well, there's been a few like that have come out quite recently as well, where I just think they've overstretched. I mean, even Dark Souls, the one from the Steamforged guys, which is the computer game which they turned into a board game. I've got it upstairs somewhere. It wasn't a great board game, actually, rushed out rules. And the problem with that, again, they just offered so many expansions in the original Kickstarter. They made a fortune, but I think they could have made a fortune on the base rules, base game, base set of models, and they didn't need to add on 3 extra expansions and 4 extra special models. And because I got a box from them 4 years, I think it was, after the original campaign, so they delivered 4 years a single kind of expansion. But it had been so long since I played the game, I didn't sort of pick it up and even play it. It was just something to go on the shelf. Just unfortunate, really. But just don't overstretch. I think they need me as an advisor. You know, bring me in that last day when they're planning their final Kickstarter, and I'll just say, cut all that crap out, just give them a base game, deliver it, and then hold on to those expansions for the next Kickstarter, like Expansion 1. But deliver the first one, everybody will be happy, and they'll pay for the expansion later on. That's my advice to all of them. If only the world would listen to common sense, but they don't. But anyway, I say that I'm going to do a Kickstarter for the new version of Grunts later this year, but I'm going to have the rules pretty much done, and I'm going to pair up with some established miniature companies like Brigade Models and Harold from Clear Horizon, and possibly Ground Zero Games, we were chatting. But a blend of them, or maybe one. I'll see how we get on, to offer a kind of a bundle with the rules that, you know, a cheaper entry to 15mm gaming with maybe some unique models as well, new things. Rambling on there, but anyway, as I was saying, I don't want to do that and overstretch. Don't want to offer the world. I just want to offer something I know I can deliver. That's the main thing. And luckily, I've managed to do that with the 2 rule sets already, Imperial Skies and Grunts. They were delivered. But they are hard to support as well, really hard to get momentum behind doing something minor with them. It's easier to, you know, I've waited since 2012 with Grunts to redo the rules, and it's time now to get that done, and it's going to be tough, but hopefully I will get it out later this year. And someone might say, why are you then doing all these videos? You should be doing the rules. Well, I do playtests most Saturdays. I've been doing them on and off through the summer, so we've had, you know, more than about 10-15 playtest full Saturdays, which is hard work. And next year I'll take them on the road as well, but later this year I'll get the final set finished up. ready for a Kickstarter. But yeah, it's hard work, and I think I mentioned before that when you're writing rules, you have a tendency to get to 95% done. I literally had my rule book. I think my Raspberry's dead. Oh no, it's come back alive. So I can fire up the rules here actually, just while I'm chatting and still showing off some of the materials here. No, it hasn't died. I may have to restore pages. Oh, well, that's the first thing I was going to show earlier. This is the AK Interactive chipping page. I mean, they haven't really done anything else since they did this stuff. It's taking an age to load, but you can see price-wise, it's €3.50. It's equivalent to £3.40 or something in that order, and they still just do the heavy and the worn chip effects, which I bought. And I think, given the prices of some of the Games Workshop stuff, this is a reasonable price. Yeah, back to the rules. So obviously this is my book PDF format for the first version of Grunt's version. Called it 1.1 because I'd gone through probably 3 years of play test, writing, development, shows. I tell you what, it feels quite embarrassing. I was at Salute Wargames show probably 3 years running with Grunt, but for 2 years running I hadn't got it out the door. I was just still playtesting, still playing with friends, and so the whole point of what I was going to say, because I am rambling now, you feel like you're 95% done. You literally think, I must have like a week or so more to do. And it's not, it just gets you. You find that last 5% of the book, you've got 120 pages, and the last 5% of getting the layout right, getting the art in, organising the whole thing is really hard work, and it's tough. So this is an interesting vehicle because I'd love someone to make this. I've got that artwork in the rules, and you may be interested to know that artist Istan Pelli, is that how you pronounce it? I can't really zoom. I should really zoom into that, but he is the lead design artist, 3D design artist. I think he's Russian, but also lives in California now, for Sony PlayStation. And he always had this amazing website detailing some of his work. And I simply wrote him a note and said, "Can I license some of these for use?" And he was happy to entertain doing that, even though he was working on the new Fallout 3 or Fallout 2, I think it was. It was Fallout 2 because this was like 8 years ago or so. So he allowed me and licensed the use of these in there. So he's quite a famous artist. But when you're writing rules like this, you kind of go all over the place to try and find someone that would say yes to low-cost art, because you're not going to make a huge amount of money from a niche. I mean, it's really niche. 15mm sci-fi is doing okay, but look at 40k. 40k people are practically popping out bushes all over. I just joined a new company there, and I mentioned other games, and they look like you feel like a ghost, because you say something that doesn't fit into the 40k universe, and they can't understand you. It's like, oh yeah, I use these 15mm sci-fi models, and I go to this Wargame show called Salute that's got a load of like independent, interesting games, and they just stare at you and they say, "What kind of Space Marine faction have you got?" And that's it. But obviously, I support all gaming. I don't have a problem with 40k. I do have some Dark Angels stacked away in the garage somewhere, and it's a great game. So a lot of people get a lot of fun out of it, and that's the main thing with gaming, rather than punishing them for being those sort of smelly oiks in the Games Workshop stores. They are a fantastic starter into the gaming world, and still are. I still buy their materials. I bought their paints, and I still support them. But yes, the other thing I was doing, because this has evolved from airbrushing, hasn't it, now into me talking about the rules. But I wanted to make sure I had a lot of these detailed, coherency, movement. I wanted in my rules. Now, and it's 40k. I particularly will call out on this. I wanted to be in a position where if someone had some models on a table like this one and they were doing something wild, like they said, I want to be able to open that container, run through to the other side, climb up on the roof, or do something with the environment. I wanted there to be a skill usage, and I wanted to cover that. So I had all those sort of bits and pieces in the rules, like mouse holing, which is something that the US forces did in Afghanistan and Iraq, where the mouse hole would be a shot down through the side of a building. And they would then be able to send the troops through building at a time, not using the front door, but using the big mouse hole entrance they've put through the side of the building. So I sort of thought about all those kind of things. I wanted them in there. I don't know whether it really delivered it, to be fair. It didn't. It's a good fun game, and I know there's a lot of people that do enjoy playing it, but there's also a lot of people that find the detail around how you roll your damage and the attacks from squads, and you're rolling for every member in the squad, a bit challenging. So that's one of the things I've addressed, which you may notice I'm using some group bases here. And that's part of what I'm trying to do with the new rules, is I'm trying to extract the basing away from being specific. So if someone wanted to play with Flames of War style bases, they could do, the sort of rectangular, if they had some forces ready for that, or if they wanted to do round bases, and if they wanted to still continue to use their single base models, I've got that support in there as well. So yeah, that's what I've tried to do, and we really fought that over the last sort of 6 months with a couple of friends locally, where we tried various methods to make them work, and we think we've come up with something that does work. And I've not done a grand reveal on how the basing can be flexible, but it will be revealed in time, because I'm going to put a Facebook group together. So I'm still rambling through here, and as I said, when I was saying I wanted to explain everything in the rules, and I'm just paging through my rule book here, I went to town as well on these things, so on these guides. If only I could find the button that... there's the button. I'm educating myself on the ways of PDF viewing on a Raspberry Pi computer, but I think if I hit that, and then again, yes, we can see some crusty forces from Ground Zero Games on one of my terrain areas, models painted by my friend Jonathan Rogers, who's one of the main playtesters locally here. And then there, if I get rid of the picture-in-picture, is the kind of thing I wanted to do again, to cover detail on movement and attacks and things in the rules, to be really as consistent as I could do with being able to show reference. And I'm going to try and do that again with the new rules. I'm going to try and... I picked up this pixel art to use, and I'll probably use similar again, with some more actual visuals of models in play as well. And yeah, so you can see here I'm on the activation page. I did a lot of work again on getting the sort of flow charts in the book, because that's what I do for my job. I don't do flow charts for my job, but I spent 28 years working in IT, and I've done a million presentations to people where I've shown them where the data flows go towards a SQL database, and then onto the website, and then through the middle layer, and then into the web booking flow, all this kind of lark. And so I'm pretty good with flowcharts, so I'm going to do that and repeat that, because I feel that it works. And I'm going to also try and make the flowcharts be a kind of a quick reference guide as well, which I'll issue as part of the playtest when I start doing that. And this is the squad activation, which I can talk through, and I can maybe talk about some of the ideas I've got to improve it. So, you select a grunt squad, you remove models in the waxed condition from play, and there's the whole sort of flow where you're working on one individual unit at a time. But what I've done in the new rules is I focused it more on the card activation, so it's not a kind of strict I go, you go. It's quite chaotic with the cards, and the rules still support I go, you go. I've got luckily one of the people that I play with, he likes that tradition, and there's a real fight against it, isn't there? And there's the sort of the two fat lardies kind of games, and the 2-hour war games type activation, where things are a lot more flow and reaction. And then there's a lot of people that still like traditional, you get to use your models, you charge in, you fight, and then the next person has a go. And I must admit, and it's a personal opinion, I must admit, at 10:30 at night on a Friday night, if you're at the Wargames Club and you're playing a reaction style game, there's a point in the evening where everybody just looks like a zombie around the table, and they're staring at each other and they go, "Whose go was it? Well, you just reacted to what I did there. Oh, yeah, but I thought I just moved that unit. No, they moved in reaction to that other one. Oh, did they? Yeah." And you kind of all stare at each other and go, "Ah, yes, we thought this was fantastic, this reaction game, and we enjoyed it, but we've momentarily had an old person's moment, and we should just be wheeled out to the lounge to watch TV for the rest of the afternoon," because you kind of lose your track. But I am going for, obviously, as I said, the cards are a fundamental part of this. So the new activation will be focused strongly on the cards, and a lot more commander interaction where the push moves and abilities that the commanders can do within a certain distance of a squad or a vehicle are going to be quite fundamental, and you can sort of stretch what a unit can do by being pushed by a commander, and you can sort of chain things, is what I'm after. Chain things in a simple way is the idea. So I've got a lot of work to do because I have basically written all of the version 2 rules out in sort of sketch format and have done flowcharts as well, but I've got to get back into this InDesign file, which is where this is being mastered in Adobe InDesign, and then I can reorder the pages, get the sequences right again, learn from my mistakes last time. And I've got a lot of good material, hopefully, and that's why, as I think of coming back round full circle now, that's why I am doing all of these things, because as well as developing and playing on these as I do them, and for the play tests and giving these environments a try out, I'm also creating eye candy to go in the rule books, and I enjoy, obviously doing the painting and modelling as part of bringing the whole thing together. I've always considered myself like a dog or something, that's trying to get down to bed, and unfortunately I have to go all over the place before I get there. So to write these rules, I have to sort of consider all my different options and stimulate some interest other than just writing up the book, which is the tough bit, to get that layout done. So that's why I enjoy doing this. And on the subject then of these different materials, I'm in the process. Someone asked recently on Facebook, how do you store your models? And I have this for that process. Beasley cabinets, which hopefully I can show you the front of there. So in this one, it's how high are these centimetre wise? I think they're 4. They're 4 centimetre, I believe. Oh no, 5 centimetre tray Beasley cabinets, BISLEY, and they are perfect for 15mm. In this one I happen to have a plastic tray which I can then whip out and take up onto the table to play with, but with the models now going on to washers, which are really cheap washers, cheaper than Warbase's kind of MDF, I think, when you buy them on bulk, as well as the single based figures and specialists on the sort of medium style basis, but they're on a little magnetic sheet in there as well. So I can shift that around. Obviously there's a big vehicle there that's moving around that's not on any kind of magnets, but that's how I store them, and that's how I'm sort of getting all this stuff together for the new rule book, because I want to show all sorts of different combat scenarios, different game styles. I've even got a kind of a Doctor Who-ish force that, if anybody's familiar with Doctor Who, you have unit in it. Obviously I haven't got any Daleks or anything, but these ones still need their grass tufts and things doing on the base. But with Ground Zero Games now doing some really nice sort of Land Rover style vehicles, I thought they would look good for a kind of a nod in the direction of the old unit from the sort of 70s, with the cream-coloured British forces from brigade models here, and also these are the SAS forces, so I thought they'd be the elite in that force. And then I've got some Ground Zero Games walkers. I can't remember what faction they're from, but again, I'm just blending things together. So I've got heavy armour, powered armour, light forces in light materials, but there could still be special forces with a higher skill factor because they're kind of British trained. And then an SAS, which will be like more elite all round and possibly have higher armor factor as well in the rules. So yeah, it's turned into a bit of a show and tell. And what is the time? It's nearly 11, so it's now bedtime in the UK. I really appreciate some of the people that have held on for this. Let's see how long I've been streaming for then. Just a quick look. 1 hour 46. And now before I ramble on any further, I shall say goodbye, and I'll be back again to do more of these, and I'm going to do them in these stages. Might not be back tomorrow night because I'll probably be a bit too tired. I've done it 2 nights already this week, but I may just get on with it. That's the other thing I like to do, get on with it, and then I can come back on and show you an update process as well. There we go. So I'm just about to turn everything off. Thanks to anybody on YouTube and Facebook, and goodbye. Have a good evening. Don't get too hot, and if you're in Europe in the next few days, it's going to get really hot. So take it easy. Cheers. Bye.